Well, hello, everybody. Today is Friday, September 7th, 2018. This is our Power of Personal Growth class. And today we're going to be talking about separating from your negative stories. And I think this is really important because sometimes we just get into a funk. And it doesn't matter really how evolved we are as people. You're going to get sad sometimes, or mad sometimes, or frustrated sometimes. And things in the outside world might trigger you, but often it may not make a lot of logical sense why you're feeling the way you're feeling. I mean, things are often going the same way they were going the day before or the week before, and you were feeling fine then, but now you're feeling bad. So it's important to pay attention to these times, and what I want to do today is give you something that you can do during these times that can help you separate from the force that could be pulling you further down, for lack of better. So I've asked the people that are on the call live, and I'll ask the people that are listening to the recording to pull out some paper and think about the last funk you were in. And I'd like it to be recent enough so that you clearly remember it. So the last time you felt sad or mad or just had one of those episodes, whether it lasted a whole day or only a couple of hours, where you just really did not feel good. You were mad at somebody, at something, at yourself, or you were sad, or you were anxious, but whatever your funk is, however it shows up for you. And what I want you to do is try to remember. So I want it to be far enough away so that you're kind of separate from it now, but I want you to try to remember the voices in your head. And I want you to start jotting down the kinds of things that you told yourself, the kinds of thoughts that went through your head at the time. And they're going to be random thoughts, so just write them down on your sheet very randomly, you know. But it should be something that your mind is telling you. Just try to remember them and write them down as we're going through them. So the one thing that will happen often is we talk a lot at Aspire about the model and how you're in survival strategy, and you've got a belief, and the belief is not true, but you have to work on changing the belief, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But often when you're in a bad place, that bad place is taking all your energy. So when you're angry, you do have a lot of energy, but it's negative energy directed towards somebody or something or yourself. But usually when you're anxious, you have a different kind of energy, but that energy could be fight, flight, or freeze energy, so it could be very discombobulated. And neither when you're angry nor when you're anxious does that energy really help you. It's not in the form that you can actually use it to change stories, because your anger is fueled by your negative story, so it's certainly not going to destroy itself by using its fuel on the negative story, on changing it. And your anxiety is also fueled by a negative story. And your sadness is fueled by a negative story, but it kind of leaves you so depleted that there's no energy to change the story. So when you're in the funk, a lot of times, even if you can cognitively say, oh gosh, I'm causing this funk by my negative thoughts, and I need to change my negative thoughts, you might not have the will in that moment to change your negative thoughts to positive thoughts. So what can you do? And so the first thing you can do is just acknowledge that you are having thoughts and that those thoughts are influencing your emotions. And that's kind of what I want you to figure out in retrospect right now as you're writing the thoughts you had in your last funk, because usually when we're in the funk, we don't realize the thoughts. We don't recognize the thoughts that are fueling the funk. So there's actually some stages that we go through, and I call this the negative self-talk empowerment process. So we're going to go through an example here. So let's pretend that you had an interaction with some of your friends that just felt really awkward and weird to you. It could be work associates. Just think of anything that can be relatable to you. But I figured we all have friends and we all worry about our friends sometimes, so this might be a universal example. And I want you to imagine that just something was off, or they aren't calling you back, or something weird like that. And I want you to think about what might happen in that case. And so here are the 4 stages that one might go through. So in stage 1, you get lost in your drama. So you get lost in your story. And for all practical matters, in your mind, your story is the truth. So the thinking is, my friends hate me, and I'm a big loser, and this is horrible, and they're never going to like me. I've lost my friends. I'm going to have to make new friends. I'm all alone in this world. Whatever your voice is saying, but all of those thoughts feel real to you. That's stage 1. And when you're in that stage, those thoughts continue to fuel the negative feelings, and so it just gets worse until it blows over. And you end up just automatically engaging in whatever behavior you engage in to cope in that situation. So it could be crying, it could be people-pleasing, it could be yelling and screaming, it could be whatever you typically engage in, but you're all on autopilot. You're not in any kind of awareness at all. It's like going to the movies and believing that that movie is reality, which we all kind of do for a while when we're watching a movie. It makes a movie enjoyable. We get caught up in the story. But that's the way I like to think about it. You get caught up in your story. It's like you went to the movies, and it's the moments when you really believe that what you're watching in the movie is real. And you're not remembering that you're actually sitting in a theater watching it. You're actually in the movie. So stage 2 is that you actually do have some awareness that it's your thoughts that are fueling this negative place that you're in. So, for example, if we take the friends, now my thinking progresses a little bit to, I'm worried that my friends hate me, and my worry is making me feel bad about myself. So I don't feel any better necessarily, but actually I usually do feel a little bit better. I feel a little bit less out of control. Because when I realize that it's my worry that my friends hate me and not that my friends actually hate me that are making me feel bad, I'm a little bit more empowered. It doesn't mean that I necessarily have any more energy to change my thinking, but what it does is it gives you a little bit of separation, and that gives you a little bit more power, which is why I call this empowerment process, because with each stage you feel a little bit more empowered and a little bit more separate from the overwhelm of the emotions. Then we move to stage 3, which is noticing that my thoughts support a story that's not necessarily true, that I'm actually making my thoughts up. So in stage 2, we're not questioning our thoughts, we're just, oh, my thoughts are what's making me feel bad. It's not that this is real and I'm feeling bad because of this real thing. It's because of my thinking about it that is making me feel bad. But I'm still not questioning whether or not my thoughts are true. In stage 3, I'm starting to notice that my thoughts are supporting a story. And they're not necessarily true. So I actually am saying to myself, well, my friends might not actually hate me. I'm probably just making this up in my head because of my worry. And you know what? This is a pattern with me. I tend to always start worrying about my friends not liking me when I end up having some kind of awkwardness in my relationship because my friends matter a lot to me. So I know I can get through this because this is a pattern of mine. And so now you're separating even more because you're starting to question the thinking. And you're saying, you know, I'm having these thoughts because this is a pattern of mine. This is a belief system that I have. I always tend to worry about if I'm good enough as a person, and I tend to look at how my friends respond to me as evidence as to whether I'm good enough or not. So when my friends respond to me kind of negatively or neutrally and not positively, then I just automatically take that to mean that I'm not good enough. So I begin having that conversation with myself in my head. You have to do this in a non-judgmental and accepting manner. You have to accept your story because we all have them. And so berating yourself for having a story can just get you spiraling down again. Stage 4 is where we want to ultimately get to, which is completely detaching from the story. Sometimes that means you're going to create a new story. Sometimes that means you're just going to let go of all stories. So in this case, I'm realizing that this isn't really about my friends at all. It's not about what they think of me. This is my own drama about whether or not I'm good enough, and I use my friends as a barometer. So when I have situations with my friends that don't feel good to me, I make up a whole story about me not being good enough because my friends don't like me, but that's just something that I engage in to support my core belief that I'm not good enough, but I could just as easily be using the clutter in the house to support that belief. So I'm not only making this up, this doesn't have anything to do with my friends at all. And that's when you have your true detachment. And then what she can go on to say is, obviously my belief is I'm not good enough, and so what I really need to work on is reminding myself that I'm still a basically good person. Now, this type of thinking takes energy, and when you're in a funk, you might not have that kind of energy. So you might only get yourself to stage 2. And I guess that's why I want you to have this tool, because when you're in a negative place where you have no energy, if you can move yourself even from stage 1 to stage 2, that empowers you. So now what I want to do is take a look at this exercise. So I've asked you to think of a recent time that you're upset, something that you're now over. I've asked you to jot down some of the thoughts that you had in your head at the time. Now I'm going to ask you to kind of look at the things that you jotted down and ask yourself kind of how extreme were these thoughts? How close to the truth were they? Did it seem like you were piling on evidence to support a story about yourself or someone else or the world? And you know, what was the negative story or belief that you were building up with your negative self-talk? So examples are, I never get what I want, I'm such a loser, things will never go my way, people are selfish, nothing I do works, this particular person is an a-hole, I'm not good enough, that type of thing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn off the recording, and we're going to have a discussion, and then after the discussion what I might do is come back on the recording and share what people said. So now I'm coming back after our discussion, and we had a lot of good examples and good stories in our discussion. I'm just going to share maybe a few of the things that came out of the discussion for people that I thought were really helpful. I think what one person said sort of towards the end of our discussion is that it was really helpful just to remember that usually there was a story in her head if she's upset, and it really helps to remember that that story is probably not true even though it feels true. And I thought that was a really good thing to keep in mind. Another person that we talked about, you know, asked what to do in this situation, and we were talking about a particular person that was being, well, we were talking about people that were just being horrible and how to deal with those people. And what we talked about that I think was really important is that what you do about people being horrible is still the same whether you're caught up in a drama about it or not. In other words, if somebody sets fire to your house, it's wrong that they did it. And you can either be really upset about the fire, or you can be detached from your upset about the fire, but still you're going to probably sue the person or request damages or somehow expect that it gets made up, you know, that they reimburse you for everything that you've lost. So no matter what the behavior, I don't know why I thought of setting fire to a house, but no matter what the behavior, if they owe you money, or if they yelled at you, or if whatever they did to you, if somebody is doing something to you that's having a negative impact on you, it doesn't mean that going through this thinking process is about forgiving them and saying, oh, well, maybe they have a good reason for doing it. They probably do have a good reason for doing whatever they're doing, and their perspective of the situation probably, in their mind, what they're doing is very justified. And it probably still has a negative impact on you. You're still going to deal with it no matter what. So if someone yells at you, and they feel like they have a right to yell because they're angry, but yelling is not okay with you because you have a boundary about yelling, then you have two scenarios, right? One scenario is that you can be really indignant and upset and resentful that the person yelled at you, and you can set the boundary with self-righteous edge to your voice, like, nobody yells at me, how dare you? And it'll come across as really judgmental, and it'll just continue the contentiousness between you, and they might still yell at you. Or you can be detached from your drama, and you can say, I get that you're angry and that's why you're yelling, but yelling is not okay with me. I'm happy to talk with you about this, but I'll talk to you about it when you're not yelling, and then remove yourself from the situation. So that's setting a boundary, but it's a lot easier to set that boundary when you're not all caught up in the drama. So I think one thing that we talked about that was really important is that there are two issues at hand when someone else is treating you wrong. One is how you're going to deal with that person, and one is what you're telling yourself to fuel your anger or your anxiety or your sadness and hurt about it. And whatever you're telling yourself to fuel your anger or your anxiety or your sadness and hurt about it, that's making you less effective in your ability to handle it. So processing all that anger, anxiety, hurt, whatever it is, by going through these stages and realizing that part of the reason that you're feeling that bad is because you do have a story about it. So whether or not their real behavior towards you is bad or good, even if that real behavior towards you is bad and 500 people looking at it would agree with you that it's bad behavior, your upset at the bad behavior is still affecting you more than the bad behavior itself is, if that makes any sense. So that is the thing to think about. You want to separate yourself. It doesn't mean don't be emotional. It doesn't mean don't validate your emotions. It's just don't let the emotions have power over you. So if you have any more questions about this is a difficult concept to get to probably without discussion. So please feel free to reach out to me if you're listening to the recording and if you have any situations that you want to talk through.